Good morning and welcome to day 3 in our series of videos discussing assessment. Day 1, we introduced formative and summative and defined those two terms. And yesterday, we discussed why it is important to use those terms with students as they work through the assessment you have planned for them in their classes. Today, we want to talk a little bit about the importance of telling students what to expect in terms of assessment right at the beginning of the unit of instruction. So here's an analogy. The first time I ever went to Faraya, I was a passenger in the car. And not owning a vehicle myself, I approached that journey as a passenger. Had a wonderful trip. There were friends in the vehicle. We were talking. We were enjoying the trip, just generally having a good time. 45 minutes later, we were in Faraya and we enjoyed everything that the ski slopes offered us. And then we went home. Same thing on the way back. Enjoyed conversation. Noticed one thing out of the window that I hadn't noticed on the way there, some old Roman ruins. And I wondered, funny I didn't notice them on the way up. And we got home. The next time I went to Faraya, it was after I had purchased a motorbike. And I was the driver. But I had no idea how to get there. In my first journey, I had not taken any notice of how to get there. I didn't know if we had driven north or south or west or east. So the steps I had to take were quite different to the first time. I opened Google Maps, I did some searching, I found it, I plotted a course, I hopped on the motorbike and off I went. And then the same thing to come home. And it was only then that I realized that the previous time we had gone to Faraya and back on a different road. Why do I bring up that example? Well, oftentimes, classes or units of work or learning episodes that we design for our students are like my first trip to Faraya. Students have no idea what is in store for them at the end, and along the way they don't take notice of the important things. They don't know that when you get to this point on the highway, you turn right. They don't know that you should take note of this point, note that down because that's an important point along the way. When you come back, you'll need to know that one. Had I been told at the very beginning that, Bruce, you will need to take notice of this journey because you will need to do it again at some point in the future, then the journey that I had taken very first time would have been quite different. I would have noted, you turn off the highway just after you go through the tunnels. Okay, then you go through some roundabouts and you keep going. There's a point at which you could go right or go left. If you go left, you'll go through the town. If you go right, you'll take a more direct route. This is an analogy to say, or to emphasize how important it is at the start of your unit of instruction, your chunk of learning, your chapter of work, that you explain to the students at the end of this learning journey, at the end of this chapter, you're going to be assessed on these 4 things, these 5 things. These are the things you need to know. Along the way, we're going to be covering these things. Having that conversation, highlighting those points at the very start of your unit or chapter is a critical part of preparing students for their assessment. It is so important that students know what they're going to be assessed on at the end of the unit from the very beginning. Now let me backtrack even a little bit further. That is why it is so critical that you as a teacher design the assessment for the unit or the chapter before you design the teaching or the activities you're going to do throughout the unit or throughout the chapter. The sequence should be when you're planning your lessons or the unit or the work that you are giving to students, you plan the learning outcomes first. What do we want students to learn? Tick them all off. What are the main points in this chapter? What are the most important understandings that our students or that my students should finish this unit with? And you list them off. The next step is then to design the assessment. This is how I'm going to assess my students on that list of understandings or skills or competencies. That's step 2. And step 3, the final step of your planning should be, this is how we're going to get there. These are the activities we'll do. These are the resources that I will present to them. These are the pages of the textbook that I'll ask them to work through on these particular days in that particular sequence. That is a really critical part of preparing students for assessment. So if you're not doing things in that order with those priorities, then you're not preparing your students as well as you should be for their assessment. Lots of things to think about here. So we'll leave our day 3 video on that with that content. Plan your assessment before you plan your teaching, and make sure you share your assessment with the students at the start of the unit, not at the end. It's been another episode of The Director's Desk. Bye now.